Right now, Iran and Israel are locked in a brutal economic war as well as a military one. The question everybody is asking is simple but terrifying. Who breaks first? The answer might shock you because it may not be who you think. Israel just spent $67.5 billion US fighting in Gaza. That's by Western estimates. Also by Western source estimates, the Israeli economy lost over $1 billion in value in the first 2 days of the war they initiated. So that's the kind of economic loss they're looking at. Now they're potentially burning through another billion at least every 2 days fighting Iran. That's the knock-on economic costs combined with the military costs of using fighter jets for this long in terms of deployment, combined with the ammunition costs for missiles used in Iran and the interceptor missiles used back home to defend against the missiles from Iran. Their defense budget has literally doubled from 17 billion to 34 billion in just 2 years, and that's not including the new flare up now that they triggered. That's insane money even for a wealthy nation, right? They're just that gun that fires. I don't know. There's an animation budget coming in strong again. But here's where it gets interesting. Iran entered this fight already impoverished, for better or worse, right? Obviously, it's not good for the people, but hear me out. What some Israeli news sources mention, I too will mention now. Though I'm not pro-Israeli, calm down. Iran suffered electricity blackouts for hours at a time, pretty much year-round, before this conflict started. Sanctions have crushed the economy of Iran for decades. It's the price you pay when America, during its superpower years, tells you to fall the hell in line and you give them the middle finger. I'm not going to, and proceed to chant death to you get the point, right? They're not happy with how you responded. Very rebellious, very out of line. Well, you get the idea. And their defiance, comes with a hefty cost. 1/4 of the population in Iran currently live below the poverty line. By every economic measure, Iran should collapse first. On paper, you look at who's going to collapse first. You pick, the stronger economy. You say the weaker economy is going to collapse first. But hold on. There's a psychological factor most analysts are missing. Iranians have been living with hardship for 46 years since the revolution that gave birth to the theocratic Islamic Republic currently in power today. Hardship isn't new to the people in Iran. They've adapted to sanctions and inflation and embargoes and shortages and sabotages and economic pain in ways that would break most Western societies. Meanwhile, Israelis are used to Western standards of living, with Big Daddy America paying for everything, supporting them in every possible way, diplomatically, militarily, economically. Give me the enjoyment, right? Living our best life out here. When the economy tanks in Israel, this coddled, well taken care of state, when businesses close, when the tech sector struggles, when there's air raid sirens in cities across this Western, cultural nation, it's a huge shock to their system, right? They don't have the stomach for it, by and large. They forget that they aren't living in New York and London. It's jarring. Suddenly, they're living in Tel Aviv, bam smack in the middle of the desert lands of the Levant, and it really hits them, right? And here's the kicker. About 10% of Israelis hold dual citizenship, with many more having extended family and friends and places to stay in the rest of the West. When things get really hairy, they have options. European passports, American connections, property abroad, right? They're just out. Their home, even though Israel's apparently their home has been for 3,000 years. But no, the other home, right? They can just leave. Iranian citizens, none of that nonsense. They're stuck. Right, this is their only home. No mental gymnastics. No promised. Florida was promised to me 5,000 years ago. No, they're Persians living in Persia. Well, 60% are Persians. So they endure because they must. Right. Iran's government is also a commanding and centralized government structure, like China or Russia. What in the West would be called an authoritarian regime. Right, they can force their population, by and large, for better or worse, I'm just giving you the analysis. They can force their population to accept sacrifices in ways Israel's hybrid democratic ethno-state government simply cannot. They can't make the same things fly with their coddled Western cultural citizenry. While Israel debates budget deficits and credit ratings in the Knesset, Iran's more commanding centralized system can just drop a cheeky fatwa, suppress dissent, and redirect resources wherever the state needs it at that moment. So yes, Iran's economy is objectively weaker. But in a war of attrition, economic resilience isn't just about GDP or foreign reserves. If it was, then Russia would have absolutely collapsed, with Ukraine being directly backed, well, indirectly backed, I should say, by NATO, including by the United States. What happened? Russia's doing just fine, actually. It's not about just what's on the paper. It's about who can endure pain for longer, especially in a war of attrition. Iran has always endured pain they felt was injustice upon them. This is more of the same, if at a higher intensity. But Israel, it can dish out, but it's not used to taking it, right? And from 2 years in Gaza, their cries for help now are often eliciting skeptical looks from the international community, if not eye rolls or outright laughter back in their face. Because if you appear teary-eyed walking through your street, your neighborhood, and it looks like a war zone, and your houses or your apartments look like wet cardboard, civilians are suffering. You talk about how my neighborhood, I'm suffering, my fellow civilians in this Israeli city are suffering. Many across the globe who have just watched Palestine turned to absolute rubble, a smooth, dusty ground, seen formula milk restricted from babies and mothers being popped in the head. What? Genocide live streamed. Well, you may be very hard pressed to find any sympathy now that the tables have been turned. You've just had Iran drop a Uno reverse card on you. People aren't going to suddenly care about you. They're going to be like, well, where was this? Where was this for the people you've just been doing it to for the last 2 years? Are we supposed to actually take your suffering seriously now? That's almost like taking the mick. Time will tell how things turn out, but it's definitely not as clear cut as Israel is winning because it's a stronger economy with more technology, and Iran is losing. If that was the case, history has shown asymmetric matchups have not always gone in favor of the side that's much stronger, more advanced, and considered the clear winner, right? The example that comes immediately to mind is Afghanistan. The United States in Afghanistan spent 20 years and trillions of US dollars. 20 years that war went on for, and trillions of US dollars doing what? Replacing the Taliban with the Taliban. Yeah, at the end, it was the Taliban again, and the US had to duck out, geet themselves out of Afghanistan and leave basically nothing. And, all their Afghans that sided with the US or cooperated or collaborated with the United States, drop them, used, abused, no longer needed. Hasta la bye-bye. Well, Allah Hafiz, but America doesn't say Allah Hafiz. You get the point. So, it's not a clear-cut win for Israel, despite what people might be thinking. And it doesn't make me pro-Iranian for saying that. It makes me an analytically clear-sighted individual who doesn't allow himself, especially in the English-speaking world, to be discombobulated or doesn't allow himself to be completely, doesn't allow himself to be completely consumed or overwhelmed by the propaganda and the Western spin. So for the unbiased news and analysis without the Western spin, I'm Mahfouz, and I'll see you on the next one.